Today's show is brought to you by Skunk2 BMF camshafts. The camshafts the guy beating you isn't running.
I think this should be like the journey into all motor history, since it's like a popular class now, which just blows my mind that it's a popular class.
Huge.
I mean, all motor was the redheaded stepchild of import racing for last 30 years.
I guess we start with that. Like, what were some of the reasonings for all motor being that stepchild?
Because people just don't get it. You know, people still don't get it. The only thing that's different now is they just decide to focus on all motor because there's more drama in it than there is sport front. Sport front is like everybody got the same shit that's run within a tenth, right? Something like that.
So it
Good
started
days, bad days.
So it started as a lack of understanding and people not being able to succeed because they didn't understand. So they've opted to slap in a turbo on.
It's a mindset, right? So the mindset is there's one that's chasing ultimate power and speed, and then the other one's chasing ultimate efficiency. And they're two very different things. Because when you put the power and speed on top of the efficiency, it goes faster.
Sure.
Right. So we've always said, and it's funny because our old friends in the all motor industry, or in the early days of import racing, like you get guys like Kubo and stuff like that. They realize that we're chasing the higher form factor. They're actually all pro stock fans. They're not fuel fans. You know, like all the guys that I knew in the early days of import racing, at least on the all motor side, they're all like, all the ones that were really into efficiency were all pro stock fans. You know, you had the Gary Kubos, the Sean Carlsons, guys like that. We just never really pivoted into the turbo stuff, right? Because for me, that's just not that interesting, right? Just turn the knob, make sure the shit holds together, make sure you got traction. So it becomes a race for weight, big tire, like gears, like all of those things. And those aren't engine efficiency. Those are driveline efficiencies, powertrain efficiencies.
Or the secret technology in turbos that not available to the public the next year.
Yeah, I mean, look, every turbo advancement's just been somebody else using a bigger AR or clipped wheel or some shit like that. You know, you got the Millers and things like, yeah. The early days, it wasn't like that. People still had their choice of Greddy turbo, HKS turbo, Turbonetics turbo, and then the precision turbos came out, and then like Miller was clipping wheels and things like that other people figured out. Like, you know, you get these outfits like Speed Factory, where they're just glomming onto what the leaders do, you know, and then they just don't tell the rest of the people that the leaders do this. You know, like how many people are putting T6 flanges or you know, T6 bodies on T4 flanges? Start there. There was no class originally, right? So it's like, okay, if you're going to say the earliest days of all motor, it's us and Jeremy. Yo, dog.
Jeremy, Drag Cartel Jeremy.
Drag Cartel, Lukowski, right? He had his H22 engine. I was doing road race stuff in Thailand, and I got a bunch of trick parts from them to put into these drag cars. And we just kind of dominated everybody ever since we got into it, right? So the first battle of the imports, we came out with a B16A that was stroked out to like, I don't even know, is it stroked out? I think it was stroked out to 1.8 or 2.0, but you know, people weren't stroking things back then. And then we stroked it up to, you know, 95 crank. We did all these stroking things before, when people were still buying spoon parts, you know, all the JDM stuff. The JDM guys don't push it. So I don't know why all the JDM people are all fucking JDM fanboys. Like JDM companies do not push the limits. So if you're a JDM fanboy, just know you're in the B team, not the A team. He's like laughing. What, you have to deal with that shit too?
Oh, you don't even understand. It's
the Japanese are too conservative. They ain't gonna push their shit to the limits. Hell no. That's like a American thing. We'll push it to the dumb limits, not just the limits, the limits that border dumb. And if it survives, the hard gets set up there.
that's when you go fast.
Yeah, that's when you go fast.
If you ain't breaking shit, you're not going fast.
Drag racing is an American thing. Drag racing ain't a fucking, you know, what's that place they race in England? Sanapod. It ain't that. You know, it ain't Sanapod with whatever fucking portable timing and scoring bullshit that they have, you know, out in England. It's like, look, England, you give them road racing, you give them hill climb. Right? Their hill climb shit crazy. But then we have the ultimate hill climb. We have pikes. All right. So anyways, we're getting way off track.
So you're talking Battle of the Imports.
Do you remember any of this stuff, Davey?
I don't. So that predates me and drag.
Well, I don't know. When were you born?
1986. So you figure.
So, okay. So yeah, I mean, you were 12 years old.
Yeah. So 12 years old, that takes me right around the time. So my earliest recollection of drag racing as a whole goes back to the Kubos and E-Town and
That's the early 2000s.
early 2000s. I remember Ralphie from DRT having that front-mounted white Civic Coupe. But, you know, the standouts were the Sakuras, the Kubos, and, you know, a lot of these you would see in these magazines. Turbo Magazine,
Right.
Super Street Magazine. There's actually a picture floating around with me holding, I think I sent this to
You
you.
sent that to me. It's like, oh, how cute. JB Marsh is a kid.
Turbo Magazine with, and I forgot who was on it was a white and blue Civic, yellow stripes.
Oh, Vit Lamb.
Okay.
Vit Lamb. That was Vit Lamb's car. Wicked. That's Charles's
yeah,
original
yeah.
crew.
So that's sort of my earliest recollections of it. And again, family being in the realm of the Toyotas and the Nissans. The Honda stuff was cool when we went to the racetrack, but the reality is,
So that picture of you holding that Turbo magazine, that's when cars were barely breaking in the 10s turbo.
it's crazy.
1099 turbo was like, you know, I remember Steph Papadakis crying in Sacramento because, you know, he had this EF and he was trying to make it lightweight. So he had literally had a garbage bag taped on the back of his EF. And then he cried because he couldn't go 1099. And the rest of the wicked guys were going 1099. Right?
So during that realm of the turbo cars barely breaking into the 10s, all motor didn't exist.
All motor was barely breaking in the 11s.
Got it.
Right. So it was interesting because it was only like a 1 second separation, even though we're talking massive, like they have double the power at that point. Right. So if we're making, I don't even know what we're making. If we were making, let's say 250 at the wheel, they're making 500 at the wheel. I mean, back in the old days of JG and DPR and all that stuff, everybody just wanted to make 500 at the wheel. That was like, you know, 500 is the new 1,000
Sure.
or 1,000 is the new 500. Right. Everybody wants 1,000 now. Well, back in those days, 500 out of your drag turbo kit, you know, with your aquarium check valve set up, 10-second car, man. It's pretty basic.
So then thinking of that time of those cars going 11s, the only all motor car that I can really remember was that Busy car. Like, where does Busy Moto fall?
PC doesn't come in until later. So in the beginning, it was just us and Jeremy. And then we had like Sheng Chao.
Okay.
Sheng Chao is JHP USA. He had a 13-second Integra. And then we had some PYR, Peter Yem Racing. He was the all-motor spin-off of Wicked Crew.
Okay, I remember Wicked.
Right. And then we had like Jay Yusan. I think Jay was part of Cyber or Bullfrog or something like that. So in the beginning, it was just those guys.
And this all sounds like West Coast. This is all primarily West
It's all West Coast, right? If you're saying, okay, the company was started in like 95, and if we're going all motor racing in like 99 or 2000, I don't even know what those dates are.
Yeah,
right?
so high school.
It's like in the late 90s, we were going all motor racing. Well, I came out originally with road race stuff. So we showed up at the first Battle of the Imports with, I had 6-piston AP brakes on there, right? Like full floating rotors, like, no, maybe it was 4-piston because you couldn't get the full package in a 15-inch wheel. I had like 15-inch, you know, wheels with Toyo RA1 tires. And then we smoked everybody at the first battle. And then we're going like, man, that's not fair. They're comparing our car to everybody else's car, and everybody else is on these 13-inch Bogarts with gumballs and shit like that, and we're on road race tires. That's not fair. Not a fair comparison. You know, like Jeremy was running an H22 and we're running B16A that was stroked out. It finally got to the point where the comparisons were never fair. So I'm like, F it. I guess I got to take this beautiful car that was seam welded and built for road racing. Just got to cut all that shit out and make it drag race standard.
Which chassis?
This car?
Oh, so the same car.
Same car. That's the original car. Bought that from a junkyard in 1990. I don't know, 98. Bought that from a junkyard. But at some point it had to lose weight, become a drag car. Because this road race, it was 2,200 pounds, right? And I think the drag race limit back then was 1,700, 500 pounds of dead weight that you're hauling around, you know? So it was like we were separated by maybe a tenth every time we raced Jeremy with the road race chassis. And then once we made it to a drag race chassis, then we put half a second on everybody and we were the first in the tens, you know? So that first, it's at my house. I'll show you later. The first all motor Wally that NHRA
Actually, I
gave
think,
out
yeah, you sent me a picture of that.
in
Yeah.
1999. Yeah, that was when we finally took the road race car and stripped it down to drag race weight and put gumballs on it and just blasted everybody like half a second.
And it's funny hearing that even with the weights at 1,700 pounds, it's almost like the evolution of all motors sort of went backwards in a certain case. Like if you look at the actual, the pro cars, and even before it was a pro car, saying a 1,700 pound drag car, in my mind, it's like, where was the disconnect where everything, now all the weights started going up, where like the limits for like a 106 at one
I
point.
don't know. What do you think the weight of this car is?
If I had to guess, with an engine, 1,490.
It's close, 1,550 with ballast.
Okay, yeah,
So it's actually under 1,500 without ballast.
I believe it.
You know, so we have like 50 to 100 pounds right over the axles.
Yeah.
You know,
So it's like, where did that turn? And all of a sudden, it's almost like the industry wanted to slow the class down in certain regards, or
yeah, they took the wheelie bars off, you know, they like kept it more steel body, but now it's like in the pursuit of going faster, if you're not improving your power output, you can only go to weight, you can only go to traction,
Sure.
you can go these different things. Weight, traction, fuel, right? Which is essentially what you've seen in the last 10 years. I mean, you came out with a better chemical solution and you left everybody behind, you know? We came out back then with a better mechanical solution with a little bit of the chemical solution, you know, not that we weren't using nitro, but like the first fuel that we're using was Toyota Atlantic fuel, which was heavily oxygenated, burn your eyes. People accuse us of nitro, but it was propylene oxide. It wasn't even nitropropane. So it burns differently, you know, makes you cry differently.
but still gasoline based, no methanol at this point.
Yeah, in the beginning it was all gas. And then I remember when we went out to the East Coast, out to Virginia for a race with Dial the Imports. That's the first time that we saw Norris's stuff. He had like a red DC2.
Yeah, I didn't know Norris back then.
Yeah, so he had a red DC2, and then he came up with then when we got back into it, and there was a period after '99 where we just weren't into it. You know, we were doing other stuff. You know, we were probably doing Roger Foo's and Taz Harvey's, you know, SCCA Pro road race cars. So it's kind of like when we're not drag racing, we're out doing something else. It's not like we're just sitting on our asses, you know, talking about how great we were in the past. We're definitely not that. We're definitely not those people. But yeah, in the early 2000s, we didn't do anything. And then we decided to come back out in 2004. When I saw the K engine, I'm like, oh, this is where it's at, right? This is before anybody was onto the K, because we got the Delta chassis really early, because we got the RSX we were working with Honda factory HFP. HPF is HFP. You know, we're working
HFP.
with them, and it was great because Matt Pearson, who was one of the original editor of Super Street, he was actually working for Acura PR. So we're able to get the cars early, and so we started doing the K engine, and it was just sort of like, this is the engine, right? If you look at the K engine, if you look at Honda history, the prototype for the B16 and the B18 was actually the B20 Prelude. Right? The Prelude was the experimental motor, right? So originally it had the B20, and then we get the B16 and the B18. Then the Prelude came out with the H engine, right? Which was the twin cam version of the F. Well, guess what? The bore centers and all of that is the same as the K, right? And then we got the S2000 kind of replaced the Prelude as the experimental platform. You know what I'm saying? So you see this, like the Prelude and the S2000 have been like the experimental platforms to prove out certain engine geometries. Like the H bore spacing is the same as the K, right? And then the S2000 is basically if you took the H and you put rollers on it, and then you had some weird fucking reverse rotation timing chain thingy to get high RPM, right? And then the K came out. So it's sort of like Prelude, H, S2000, K, and K, right?
Which that's an important piece. Like I've never looked at it at that level, but it totally makes sense.
So when we ran all of those records, it was with that crank. I know people have their Honda all-motor drag race heroes. Let me tell you, it's not and it's not.